I was reminded of a joke unto which I love and has made me laugh for a very long time. So I wanted to share it with you. So, what were the last words that Jesus spoke to his disciples? So if anybody think for a minute, about those biblical stories. And he looks at his disciples and said, "Hold my Easter eggs. I'll be back in 3 days." Maybe. I always just laughed out loud hysterically. But anyway, thank you. And be sure to take it and use it. It's yours for the next week to share with whoever you'd like to share it with. Oh gosh, thank you so very much for being here today. And today, as we may or may not know, today is Palm Sunday, that the Centers for Spiritual Living also picks an annual theme every year. And this year, it's Living Everyday Wonder. And April's connection is creativity. So the theme, being creative and fun, is to dance with the donkey. I received a couple of texts from friends who are like, how are you going to do this? What is this going to do? So as I kind of dug in for the week, it was pretty special. So I'm grateful to be here to share it with you. So far this month, Reverend Dr. Elizabeth spoke on saying yes to the divine yes, that much larger yes that comes through our day-to-day connection to spirit. It lies in each one of us. Today, as we celebrate Palm Sunday, the first day of Holy Week, we also want to recognize the many paths to God, by which it is the second week of a month-long celebration of Ramadan. So we are so grateful for that celebration. And Saturday, this week, commemorates the beginning of Passover, which symbolizes the liberation from slavery in Egypt for the Israelites. Passover, in its definition, is the literal passing over from an old state of consciousness to entering a new one. To rise in awareness, we transcend the mortal to live from the I am. What I love about the Centers for Spiritual Living and Ernest Holmes is it picks some beautiful pieces from many, many different teachings and many different teachers to show us that it's all connected. It's all connected. As a child, I grew up in the Catholic Church. I can remember that my parents in their bedroom had on one side of the wall the crucifix with the ivory pieces on the cross with the crucifixion of Jesus. And there was always a palm that had been folded into a cross that kind of dried in behind this. And that was always super powerful to me. And there was holy water in the back because the back slid open and you could put things in it. So there was this little tiny bottle of holy water in it. So we were that family in the front row of the church, all lined up in our Easter dresses and our clothes and our new shoes and all that. And it was very powerful for a long time until we started realizing and started thinking that what was being said and how it was being presented didn't really translate anymore, and it didn't feel like our truth anymore. And I'm grateful to my parents because they made the switch to Centers for Spiritual Living when I was very young. So as a child, you just go with what your parents are doing at that time. So I'm very grateful that that was something that they realized early on. And so Palm Sunday and Easter week, that holy week leading up to Easter has always been a big thing for myself and my family. Symbolism and a roadmap to the Bible instead of a literal interpretation is what the Centers for Spiritual Living did for me. It took those pieces of the Bible and Jesus's teaching and really taught me the symbolism behind it, the words behind it, and to know that it wasn't a literal interpretation. When that nugget came into my consciousness, I was like, okay, Now that makes perfect sense, that it's laying the roadmap to understanding the relationship between myself and God, spirit, universe, whatever you want to call it. In keeping with the inspiration of creativity this week, again, we are asked to dance with the donkey. I will ask you also to creatively use the donkey, your donkey, as a metaphysical example of our human obstinance and exhausting resistance to what is. Right? So now the pieces are coming together. At the same time, we always want to acknowledge the opposite side of that same coin, to see our gifts of innovation, wisdom, and resilience as we talk about the story of Jesus today. Jesus the mystic and Palm Sunday, and how he danced with his donkey in the final days of his life. Please note how we can use these lessons as he went through to model our own path in our lifetime. Are we good? All right, here we go. All right. That day, Palm Sunday, starts with Jesus riding into Jerusalem on the back of a donkey. People on the streets waving palm fronds as he traveled into the city like a rock star. He was as close to a modern day celebrity as we could imagine today. After all, Jesus was a mortal human being. I think we forget that sometimes with all the religious fervor that tends to surround the life of Jesus, and why so many of us, as we grew up spiritually, really got turned off to the whole thing. Here at the Centers for Spiritual Living, we like to take a metaphysical view of the biblical stories. Ernest Holmes, who we also consider a modern mystic, loved Jesus. Loved Jesus. He wrote many, many books on the teachings. Jesus is regarded as one of the greatest spiritual teachers to ever live. He felt love, but he also felt pain. Nevertheless, he felt the joy of being filled with a message and knowing his job was to be the light in all things. To speak his truth even in the face of those around him who heard his words, saw the miracles, and chose fear. Could you imagine what a different world we would live in today if those people had chosen love instead? Mind blow, right? Remember that his teachings up to this point were well received by others that were awakening to remembering who and what they were. It was a message of hope and the love of something bigger than our day-to-day human existence and the power that that understanding carried. The peace we sought is found within, and the kingdom of heaven is within our reach right now. If we would go within and not continue to look for it outside of ourselves. But those in charge at the time saw their power slipping away and being able to control the masses. For me, that is the difference between religion and spirituality. Religion is about power and control and fear, and spirituality is about connecting to the oneness and wholeness of God in real and tangible ways. Okay, quick show of hands. How many of us growing up thought that Jesus' last name was Christ? Me! Right? In actuality, he was manifested in God's image and likeness. As a human, just like you and me, always remembering that he was a human first. We see the Christ self within, not a name we attach to who we are. What would God do? What would that energy do? What would spirit do if it had taken on a physical form? Jesus was the one at the time in history that understood that connection and that conversation. He was performing at the time what were considered miracles. But we know now that he was affirming what we could not affirm for ourselves, that the power to heal comes from within, not without. To pick up our carpet and walk, we must believe that we can do it. If that man could not believe that he could walk, there was nothing that Jesus could say to him to make him think otherwise. We have to change our thinking to change our lives. Ernest Holmes, that's his favorite line, change your thinking, change your life. Nothing will change without that. He knew he would die for what he was saying. And during this whole time, he knew he was going to die for what he was saying. Now that is commitment. How many of us right now would be willing to do that for what we believed in? Well, to prove how fast things can change, like they do even now in our own lives, his best friend Judas betrayed him, and by Thursday that same week, he was sentenced to death for what he believed. Jesus sat amongst his disciples, enjoying dinner, and knew that it was all unfolding in divine right order, or it wouldn't be happening. At that next moment, his donkey appeared, casting doubt and fear that he went into the Garden of Gethsemane to double check with God on his path. He asked God, Spirit, the universe, like we all do in those what we call foxhole moments in our lives, are you sure? Are you absolutely positive this is what I'm supposed to do? This feels really crazy. Are you sure? Even when the course is clear, as humans, we will question. We will ask. Does that sound familiar? It sounds familiar to me. I will question. There is a time when I question everything before I learn to trust. And it's not like I don't do it still on occasion, but I'm way better than I used to be. And that's the whole point to all of this, is to each day do a little better. Each day choose love one more time than I did yesterday, to choose peace one more time than I did yesterday. To me, this sounds like the ultimate WWJD moment. Have you seen the bracelets? Like, WWJD, what would Jesus do? Right? Picture the scene. Life seems to be coming at us at what appears to be an unfair and incomprehensible speed, making our inner donkey, aka fear-based ego, dig in. Question everything. Why me? What have I done to deserve this? To become a victim of what's happening instead of an observer to see where there is something to learn. When we understand the work that Jesus did in the world on a metaphysical level, it is to rise above and accept what is. He shows us because we have to have proof. To see things with our own eyes, and even then, we sometimes argue the truth to fit our limited view. He shows us how to take challenges, people, and experiences into our spiritual awakening as part of the process of understanding where faith and trust come in. We remember that the Christ within us can never be harmed, hurt, or sick. As we think of it as energy, we know scientifically that energy cannot be destroyed. It can only change form. In this example, we're invited to weave our humanness with our divinity. Jesus showed us the ultimate sacrifice for what he believed. He knew he was going to die. Luckily for us, we don't have to do anything that extreme. But we can see our humanness within our divinity. We can take those things about us, our donkey-like attributes of stubbornness, unwillingness, and frustration, and decide how exhausted we want to be. And we can choose to practice the opposite. We can take the conscious time in meditation and prayer to decide what the opposite of all those things are. We can also see our strengths within that donkey of resilience, wisdom, and innovation. We choose to dance with the donkey. We move about from stubbornness to resilience, to frustration to wisdom, as we go back and forth and we do that dance and decide which we want to choose. When we choose willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness, we take on a whole new perspective in our lives. To take on life's challenges and see them as a part of the creative dance and not give up, but move through that valley of darkness, knowing and trusting that this too shall pass and the light will come again. We all know how this story ends, but it gives us an obvious path to understanding how the ego plays into creating fear. All the while during this event, Jesus was holding space for those on a different journey, not judging and knowing that they were dancing with his donkeys as he was dancing with his. He said, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." How many of us could do that in our day-to-day lives, in whatever's going on? So we, as fellow human beings, remembering that Jesus was a human. He was a human with a divine connection to spirit. We get to take great comfort in the story of Easter and this whole week leading up to next Sunday. And we get to be transformed by life circumstances and rise above and accept what is. There is a space between what's happening in our lives and my reaction to it. That space is the pause, that quiet breath of understanding that there are multiple paths and multiple choices to each question. My job and your job is to do the work and find the one that brings you peace, which brings you to remembering who and what you are. We are one with God. We are not separate. We choose to remember that. God is, I am. God is, you are. Thank you.